Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And once again, everybody, welcome to the Propreneur Podcast. So excited to have you here today, especially on a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, something that I've been studying and working on for close to 20 years now, self-improvement and personal development, and making that a priority inside of your profession. And we have somebody who not only legitimizes this, but also someone who is a bit of a celebrity in the dental world. The winner of Dentistry's Got Talent, a really gifted speaker. I love listening to him. Dr. Ankur Gupta, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Dino. Hey, I'm loving your podcast, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much. That means a lot to me. Well, I appreciate it. And if you listening to the show right now are like Dr. Gupta and you love listening to it too, make sure that you are sharing it with your friends and colleagues so they can get in on these best practices that we're always trying to provide for you as a listener. Today, Dr. Gupta, we're really going to dive into this idea of making self-improvement a priority, even if, and I know everybody's saying, oh, I don't have time for that, even if you're a busy dental professional or as a busy dental professional as well. But before we dive into all of that, let's talk about your story. I love to get into the story of my guest and find out what brought you to this moment here. How'd you get involved into the practice that you did? Love to hear the good, the bad, the ugly that made you want to get into your business.
Sure, Dino. Well, I actually went to college to become a U.S. history teacher. That was my big dream.
Really?
Yeah, either U.S. history or world history, because I really enjoyed those subjects in high school. So I go to college, and I was just a very good student. And I remember coming home after my freshman year, and I got really good grades. And my dad was like, yo, so what do you really want to do when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be a teacher. And so I'm Indian, and what you would probably notice if you knew a lot of people who had parents with Indian ethnicity is that their parents find it very inconceivable for their children to not go into either healthcare or engineering. So I was a very obedient kid. So my dad was like, I think you should rethink this. I think you should go into healthcare or something like that. In my mind, I thought that was to become a physician. I was like, Dad, all of your friends who are physicians, they're at work all the time. I'm too lazy for that. And then I'm telling you, and I'm not exaggerating here, Dino. My dad pulls out this artwork from when I was a kindergartner or first grade, some crappy little artwork where I drew that when I'm going to grow up, I'm going to be a dentist. I don't remember this. I don't remember ever drawing. I don't remember ever wanting to be a dentist. And he's like, yo, look, you wanted to be a dentist when you were a little kid. And I was like, Dad, I don't remember this at all. And so anyway, but the idea was something that I didn't have any good argument against. I was like, all right, sure, I will start taking the classes that will ultimately lead me to become a dentist. But Dad, I really like teaching. I really like history. I like teaching. And he kept telling me, and I don't know if he was genuine or not, but he said, listen, if you get into dental school and you become a dentist, you can teach as much as you want. You can talk about world history as much as you want. And I don't know if he was just saying that in order to appease me and allow me to still go to dental school and pursue that. But he was actually right. I do a tremendous amount of teaching now. I do a lot of talk about history, and that's been wonderful for me because I get to do a lot of these things that I'm very passionate about, and dentistry affords me a lifestyle where that flexibility is there. And I don't think a lot of professions allow that.
Well, I love that. And I'm so glad that your dad actually kept that piece of the innocence of you not knowing and being in a space of not remembering, but from the mouth of babes, right? Of like, this is what I want to do. And now is able to put you on this path. And I 100% agree that what you do, and for those of you who have not seen what Dr. Gupta does, you are a teacher and you teach from that stage. When you are out there presenting, you are teaching in a very powerful way too. So I love that you're able to do that. And I'm sure I haven't been able to see you in your practice, but I'm sure in your practice, that's absolutely the case too. You're teaching your team members how to live better lives and how to want for more and to be great team members, and your patients and how to actually strive for more, whether it be learning how to brush their teeth and floss their teeth, which I'm sure isn't one of your greatest or finest subjects that you love to talk about. But like that ability to teach is so powerful. That's really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So actually, you're right. So I went to dental school at University of Michigan, and my wife was also she wasn't my wife at the time.
Right.
My future wife was in my class. And so we got married right after graduating, and then we did a residency together. And then we started this practice from scratch. And
Wow.
I mean, we totally sucked as business people. We had no idea what we were doing, et cetera. Little by little, we learned a lot of core business principles that set us on a very positive trajectory. But the relationship building aspect of running the practice was something that we never struggled with. And I think that the reason why was because storytelling is a major part of being a dentist. It's when a patient has an issue in their mouth. Dentistry is this weird profession where the patient doesn't know about it a lot of the times. When you go to a physician, it's because you have a problem. Sure. When you go to a dentist, you have no problem, and then the dentist all of a sudden brings up problem.
Brings out the problem, right?
Yeah, and that is that puts you in a very precarious situation in terms of trust and in terms of loyalty. But if you tell stories, telling stories connects to people completely different than just saying, "I found a cavity, you have perio disease, blah 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 blah." It's a very different thing to tell stories and get people engaged as opposed to just telling people what they need with their teeth. And so that was something that I feel kind of lucky that I have that.
I didn't, that's awesome, because I've never really put that together, of that, the power of that. I love stories. I love obviously telling stories from the stage, stuff like that. But really, there's such a smart and insightful way to look at that as a dentist, to be able to get them involved, to get them to want to take action around a story is a lot easier than you need to do this, right? Most people don't do what they need to do anyway. They do what they want to do. Right. But to get them involved in that story of it, I want to drill down to this a little bit more, because I think that's fascinating. How do you use that story? Can you give us some examples of how you use the story in your own practice, or stories in your practice?
Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the biggest examples is periodontal disease. And perio is like a very difficult concept to explain to a patient in a way that they're going to feel motivated. Don't you think? I mean,
yeah. You just using the word perio alone is like, well, yeah, whatever. Disease, okay, that scares me, but what do you mean?
And so, okay, so I will say something like, I know my gums bleed too, I mean, sometimes if I floss hard enough, my gums will bleed. And I understand that when you hear me talk about your gums bleeding, or you hear me talk about how you're not brushing well enough, that doesn't mean anything to you. But let me tell you about my grandmother growing up in India, and the fact that she wanted to do everything right in terms of how she conducted her life, how she wanted to raise her children. She only had good intentions. And when she was 35, all of her teeth fell out of her mouth. And it's not because she ate too much sugar. It's not because she was just negligent. It was because nobody told her that, hey, listen, the fact that your gums are bleeding, the fact that your breath is getting stinky is actually, it has to do with the disease. It's not just a part of getting old. And then she had to live the more than 50% of her life where chewing food was a little bit more of a challenge. Now, I don't think that you're anywhere near that. I mean, you're already older than when she lost her teeth. You're nowhere near that. But the thing is, that's the insidious nature about periodontal disease. It just doesn't hurt. And then you got to lose all your teeth. I just don't want that to happen to you.
Okay. That just really connected with me in a way, because as you were saying that, I wrote, that I think a lot of people would probably come to you. I can imagine this, and I would do this myself of like, look, I'm not eating this, I'm not eating that, or I'm eating healthy. I don't eat snacks. I don't eat sugar, whatever excuse they have. I'm a vegan, whatever. But it's not about that. It's about what you're not doing to your teeth, the preventative things that you're doing, right? When I see that story in my mind's eye of your grandmother who, like you said, she didn't eat sugar all day long. She didn't have, bad quality of food or whatever it was. She didn't know it was important to take care of the flossing and the brushing and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
Wow.
just an example. That's the thing. I like telling stories. So that comes, it comes naturally. But I just feel like any interaction I have, if it's a story based, the engagement is just so much stronger.
Wow. That's really, really cool. I love that. You're telling a history story just a moment ago, right? When you're talking about your grandmother. So like we're going back to your history roots of loving history. When you see your industry as the evolution of what's going on, how do you use your knowledge and your love of history to propel people to their future? Is it strictly through the story? Is it through education? What are you doing?
That's a good question. No, Dino, I would love to give you a profound answer and be like, yeah, man, here's the connection. But that's not what happens. Most of the time, when we're dentists, we have a captive audience. And most of the time, I like explaining a particular world event or concept to my dental assistant as a way of entertaining my patient, right? So it'll be the 100-year anniversary of when, some guy shot some other guy and that propelled the world into World War I. And I'll be like, hey, dental assistant, do you understand? Do you kind of know what happened? She's like, dude, I've never even heard of that guy before. And I'll be like, okay, let me tell you all about it. And then it's just a means of entertainment.
Yeah.
I wish I could transform that into a way in which it would make my practice more successful, blah, 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 blah. But it's entertainment.
It's who you are.
And it satisfies that particular itch for me. And then it's entertaining for the people around me.
That's awesome. That it's like that watching the trivia shows like the Jeopardies or whatever, like you kind of know, and then you hear a story like this, like, I didn't know that. That's actually really cool. And you're the Alex Trebek, if you will, of your dental office. That's really cool. Well, let's get into some of this idea of how to actually make self-improvement a priority in your life. Has this been something that you've always had a desire for about that self-improvement? Now, when we talk about self-improvement, I think it's also good to drill down. Everyone's obviously trying to improve the way they run their practice or the way that they do their skill that they do. What are you talking about when you talk about self-improvement?
So for the past 7 years, I've been giving talks to either dentists or societies, and it's all been about the same stuff that there's a million other people out there talking about: how to run a more efficient, more profitable practice, case acceptance, marketing, customer service, etc. And that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, I felt unfulfilled when there were people who they started doing some of the advice that I had recommended, but their life still sucked, right? If you have tremendous case acceptance and you're making a ton of money, but your relationships are poor, your anxieties with your life and your home are poor, if your body is breaking down, if you don't have the energy to enjoy the life and all of that income that you brought in, then you're failing. In my eyes, our lives are just like a bunch of buckets, right? Like imagine a room and there's 30 buckets, and one bucket is named financial health, and another bucket is named philanthropic identity, and another bucket is physical health and diet and posture. And there's just all of these buckets. I think the insidious nature of life is that all of these buckets have a little hole at the bottom of them. And if you put a tremendous amount of effort towards filling one of those buckets up and then you ignore it, eventually it'll just deplete. It'll become empty again. And so the people, in my opinion, who are the best at life, the ones who win, who are just people that I really look up to, that I see as role models, they have managed to keep a lot of buckets full. And so after years of just being a kind of a dental practice management speaker, I started thinking, well, what if I talk to people about sleep, or talk to people about stress, or talk to people about relationships? How would that go? Would people show up? Would people care to listen? And I realized that is a place where there's a lot of people who they want to create that balance. They want to develop strategies. They just need a little bit of help. And I believe that I can offer a few roadmaps to get to that point where that balance is there.
100%. And you are, I like to use the word disrupting that thought process too, and that industry in that way. I'll tell you, I have personal experience with this. I've been honored to be able to watch you speak a few times. And the most recent time when you talked about posture and, the neck and being a dentist and the challenges with that, and you gave some amazing statistics, but I watched as every single person in that room, when you said, here's a way to overcome that. And it was the sitting back and pulling your head back more, right, and doing that double chin. You watched everybody in the room do it. It wasn't just to that audience of like, you're not speaking to let me say it this way. Your topic isn't just to your colleagues, it's to everyone, because we all can relate to that, whether it be being on our phones. I don't sit in a chair every day with my head cricked over somebody's mouth. I don't do that, but I am at a computer, or I am watching my phones or whatever. And so your topic really touched on so many other people. And this is why I say it's a pattern interrupter or a disruptor, because people need to hear that. And they're starving for it, and they're getting fed in many other ways. It's great. But this is a way that people want to know more about it. And I think it's great. I think it's very, very smart of you. I love it.
If I could share something, I think one big fear that I have is that I'm going to work, and just like have this crazy, awesome practice and make a ton of money and save it and put it aside. And then when that day of retirement actually comes, and that I'm going to walk away from dentistry, but I'm not going to be able to enjoy life because the cumulative effect of crappy habits from that 30-year career of working is going to make it so that life is just not that enjoyable, that I won't be able to move around like I currently take for granted. That's a big fear that I have. And I just wonder if older dentists that are older than me fear the same thing, or if dentists that are younger than me fear that some type of bodily disability might not allow them to practice as long as they were hoping. And if we could just instill a few tools to make it so that we're better, a lot of that fear can be dissuaged.
Well, am I wrong in believing that it's the same type of, I guess it would be a crossover to when you're talking to your patients, for the most part, it's just a few little tools that'll make all the difference in the world with their health of their teeth. And it's the same thing, right? It's a few little tools that will make the difference in your self-improvement.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, you had mentioned earlier, you when you were giving an example of somebody who was eating well, and you said, oh, I'm a vegan. You don't think about just what that word, the connotation of that word. You take a person who eats a standard American diet and you just say the word vegan, and it's like so unrelatable. It's just but like, right. It's like, that's like moving from Earth to Mars, right?
It's true.
It's so unrelatable. But if you take that same person who has for their entire life ate a standard American diet, and you say, listen, on Sunday, how do you feel about just filling up a handful of ball jars with your favorite vegetable, whether it's, carrots or red cabbage or red peppers or something like that. And that when you go to work, you just pack that with your lunch. So you're just eating something healthy every single day. That's like, oh wait, I can do that.
Yeah.
Everybody can do that.
Doable.
So I just chop up some veg. And then maybe they start feeling the effects of that. And they say, okay, I can bring more healthy stuff to lunch, or, I can actually start creating salads that I actually enjoy. I can start doing these certain differences. And then maybe eventually they'll be like, I think I could become a vegan. As opposed to saying, all right, every single freaking thing about your life and do this totally unrelatable transition. I just think little tools are the key, in my opinion, to every element of success.
I 100% agree. I agree. It's that, well, if you look at the Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, right? He talks in there about how everything we do is a habit. Every choice we make, we think it's a decision. It's not. It's a habit that we've created. And more importantly, it's not even the habit that makes it happen. It's the micro habit that makes it happen.
Yes.
And so like you said, like, is the micro habit going to be just that one, the salad that you're going to take to work on top of the corn dog, right? Or whatever it is, where it's like just adding that little bit to it. So what I love here is what I'm getting is that when you talk about self-improvement, you're really focused on the self-improvement of your mind, your money, your health, your relationships, your friendships, that it's all the self.
Yes. Yes.
That's really powerful.
All the buckets. Identifying what are the buckets that are important to you, and then creating a strategy to start filling those buckets incrementally.
Well, let me ask you this then, because you talk to obviously a lot of your colleagues from the stage or when you're talking to them personally. What is their number one challenge, if you will, around focusing on themselves with the self-improvement?
Well, this one's pretty obvious, but it's the number one. You asked me the number one, so I'm going to tell you the number one.
Yeah.
It's the burden of debt. The burden of debt is in my opinion, is the most insidious. It's the most insidious barrier to happiness in our culture today. Let me give you an example. About 3 years ago, I visited a dentist's office. He hired me so that I could motivate his staff to use better customer service so that they could have more patients and have better case presentation and make more money. That's why he hired me. And I talked to him for a while. He made a great income, okay? But he was going to pay some dude to fly out to his office and teach his staff how that he can make a better income. And I found out the reason he hired me, it wasn't so that he could make a better income. It's because he was so financially encumbered. The student loan, the practice loan, he bought the building where the practice was in, the 2 cars that he had, he borrowed money, home equity, in order to finish the basement. He had so many financial burdens that he needed the practice to perform at such a level so that it could satisfy all those financial burdens. And I think that the thing that really broke my heart about this was, at one point I was like, dude, why do you need to buy a new car every 3 years? And he goes, well, listen, I worked really hard for this dental practice, and I don't want other people to think that I'm not doing well. And what broke my heart about that was this guy was a full-fledged adult, yet he was so insecure with himself that he was still thinking about what other people thought of him. And I thought, man, how am I going to help this guy? There's technique, there's tools, but in the end, there's all of us carry like our insecurity and our voids. And sometimes we fill those voids with the most irresponsible decisions. And a lot of times that comes from material purchases with borrowed money. And man, I got to tell you that it kills people. It kills people. It makes people look old before they become old. Yeah. It makes people hunch over before they should be hunched over. And it makes people's relationships poor, because if you're constantly thinking about how you're going to pay that next bill, that takes up a tremendous amount of bandwidth in your head.
100%. It's the insatiable beast that never sleeps, that never leaves your side, that's always in the back of your mind, that actually helps you, or doesn't help you, it actually hinders you from making powerful decisions in your life, because you got to feed that first. And living in that fear every single day and that concern, I 100% agree. I'm very much in supporter of the minimal lifestyle and understanding that you can't let that debt own you. So that's the challenge that they have with that self-improvement, right? Because it's going to take away time money, time in their practice, the ability to actually, because they're focused on that.
Bandwidth, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
bandwidth. We only have so much.
Yep.
We only have this much capacity. You might have 128. I might have 116. It doesn't matter. We all have our own capacity.
Yep.
Once we start exceeding our capacity, we become jerks. We become lazy. We make stupid decisions. We become meaner to other people. We solve problems worse. Once we start getting to the excesses of our capacity. To identify our capacity, that's one thing, but then also to realize that there's a lot of optional things that are currently taking up our capacity. I know it. I like fancy stuff. I like luxurious stuff, but I also know that living simply allows me to have much more accessible bandwidth. Am I making sense here?
100%.
And so living simply and deciding to drive my car for another year or two so that I can save up and I can pay for my next car with cash, that takes a tremendous burden away from my bandwidth. And so debt is a big thing. In my opinion, it's a huge thing for me. Now, of course, I talk a lot about physical health and relationships, but if you need to be your best self when you encounter new changes in life. And one way to be your best self is to free yourself of a lot of your burdens.
It's interesting as you were saying that, I thought of the idea, people say, people who maybe didn't have the best physical health and then got into health. And there's that saying that nothing tastes as good as skinny feels or health feels or whatever, right? It's like really debt is the weight that you put on. Yeah. And nothing feels as good as having money in the bank that doesn't belong to somebody else before you actually have earned it.
Right. You're so right, man.
It's interesting because I'm going to ask you this. I haven't asked this question on the show before. So my core value, my vision for my business is to reverse the direction of divorce, addiction, and suicide amongst private practice owners and help them become better leaders in the office and levers at home. Obviously, in your industry, suicide's a huge burden. It's a challenge that we need to address more and more. Where do you see the lack of the willingness to have this self-improvement, to ask for help, to be legitimate with people, to focus only on what people see, right? Like the example of the person that you talked about. Where do you see this fitting in to helping overcome this challenge of suicide in your industry?
So I think about this a lot. I think about, when am I feeling most low? Now, I'm lucky enough. I've been blessed with a mind that is maybe more positive than average, right? So I've never been pulled down to a very low depth, but I often am pulled down low enough where I'm like, man, I'm just not enjoying what I'm doing right now. And this is how I kind of feel about dentistry in general. When we do more dentistry and therefore do more work and therefore make more money, that making of more money often is preceded by doing more dentistry, okay? When you do more dentistry, more things go wrong. If you place more implants, you're gonna have more failed implants. If you do more crowns, you're gonna have more crowns in which the patient has sensitivity afterwards, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is, a lot of dentists are conscientious people. They want to do good. They want to do well. They try their best. But life happens. I mean, we do dentistry and the patient, as a result of our dentistry, the patients sometimes suffer. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens. So when I do, say, just the other day, I did a couple fillings. The patient came back and was like, "Doc, I can't eat on this side anymore." That's not something that just bounces off of me. I internalize that. That's a hard thing for me to deal with. I say, wow, that sucks. You were feeling fine. Then you came into my office, paid me money. I stuck a needle in your face. I drilled on your tooth, and now you're in pain and you can't eat on this. That sucks. That hurts. And I realized that for many people, having that psychological burden of potentially hurting other people, which is a byproduct of what we do. We sometimes hurt people. That's a difficult thing to tolerate. So let me take you back to this debt thing. And I was hoping, Dino, actually, I have all this other posture stuff and diet, but let's go back to the debt, because this is important.
Yeah.
When you have a lot of financial burdens, you are going to say yes to every opportunity to do dentistry that there is, aren't you? If you have a lot of financial burdens, the patient wants those 3 crowns done, you're going to say yes. If you don't have as many financial burdens, you may slow down. And you're going to do the dentistry, you're going to do it right, you're going to slow down, you're going to do it at a pace that you're comfortable with. And yes, the small percentage of poor outcomes are still going to happen, but they're going to happen at a lower frequency than they would if you were a lot busier. And so for me, again, I feel like financial burden is one of the major, major cruxes. And a lot of practice management speakers out there, their solution to financial burden is to make more money, to do more dentistry so you can make more money, so you can take care of that financial burden. I would like to offer an alternative approach to that.
Well, you definitely are. And I think that's so insightful. It's also the idea around being able to see that when you have that financial burden, and look, I'm just going to put out there, I'm hoping that nobody who's listening to this show would ever do this, but look, I think there's a humanistic side of you that when you are burdened with so much finance, you might not be making the best choice all the time for your patient too.
I think
you're thinking
that's a temptation that every single one of us have had.
Right.
You know, I would love to say that I'm a conscientious, good enough person where I've never acted on that temptation, but the area is gray.
Yeah,
and so
me too.
I think that it's a temptation that we've all had.
Absolutely. And I definitely have in my business, right? I've taken on a client who I'm like, yeah, they're going to be not probably the best fit, but I could use the money, or we could do that. Yeah, you're right. It's a burden that we all carry, and the higher that debt rate, the worse it gets. Well, let's do this. Let's take a little bit of a shift, and let's talk a little bit about some other areas where people can make their own self-improvements. When we are talking about the mindset, when we're talking about the physicality of things, what are some areas that you like to focus in on to help people make quick but long-lasting shifts?
Well, okay, so I know that you heard me speak at the conference back in January, so I apologize for being repetitive.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm sure your listeners didn't all hear the same one.
That's right.
So I have a colleague, a dentist. He's about 20 years older than I am, and he can't put on shirts anymore. Do you remember me telling this story?
Yep.
His head is like in front of his shoulders. Like it's not on top of his shoulders. If you drew a line from shoulder to shoulder, his nose would be below that line. He looks like Quasimodo. And I know he wouldn't be mad at me if I said that because me and him have joked around about this before. He looks like Quasimodo. His head is so far in front of his neck, his shoulders. And he can't put on shirts. He can't lift his arms up over his head. He can't pull a shirt on over his head. And he told me how unbelievably frustrated it is to sit on airplanes, to put on clothing, to try to lift things up from the ground, because he has the inability to lift his arms over his head. And he said, Gupta, whatever you do, keep an eye on your posture. And I was like, man, I've been a dentist for 20 years. There are certain angles where I still have to lean my whole head over, I have my loupes and my little light on my glass. I still lean over. And I realized dentistry is going to make it harder for me to maintain positive posture my whole life. However, Dino, we have our computers now, we have our phones, all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that all of us can do on a daily basis to make sure that our head stays on top of our shoulders. So for those of you who are listening in their car, this is what I want you to do. You're sitting in your car. I want you, with your vision still straight in front of you at the windshield, I want you to just smash the back of your head against your headrest. Okay? Give yourself a double chin. Make all that flesh that's under your chin kind of bunch up. And what you'll notice is that all of those muscles behind your neck will just activate. And you do it for like 5-10 seconds, maybe a couple breaths, and then you relax. So what I did is I selfied myself with a double chin, and I hang it from my rear view mirror. So you know how some people have dice hanging? Mine is a selfie of myself with a double chin. So now when I drive, I'm telling you, Dino, it works. It's like I sit in the car and then I'll look at my rearview mirror and I'll be like, oh yeah, and I smash my head against the rearview camera. I'm sorry, against the headrest. And now all of a sudden, these muscles in the back of my neck, they're stronger, and it's easier for me to stay upright. I got one more for you. Do I have time?
Well, I just want to let you know that I do that now in the car because of you. I should take a picture of that, but I do some long trips with my wife. We're nomadic, so we drive quite a bit. And I'll hit that back of the headrest because of it. I'm like, look at my double chin. And I'll do it just to have fun, but I'll do it because I know I can feel that activation. And I've had a challenge with my posture and sitting at a computer, or like you said, with the phones. It's a challenge. So I love it. What's the next one?
Okay. So this one you can't do in your car. But next time you're standing near a wall, stand up next to the wall, put your hands in like a field goal position, so
right.
Okay. And then make it so that your ankles, your butt, your shoulders, your elbows, and the back of your head, and your fists, your knuckles are all touching the wall. And then just lift your elbows up and down. All of those points have to touch the wall. Just lift your elbow up and down. So all these muscles, kind of where your scapula is, your shoulder blades are, all of them, you'll feel them. I'm telling you, you'll feel them. Actually, Dino, do that right now. Try that. Are your hands free?
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
Now just pull them back. And then now lift your arms up and down. You feel that, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It feels. The first time I did this, I had no range of motion. My elbows barely went up and down without me separating from the wall. Now I have so much more. It actually, the strength is there, and it's not like I'm devoting 5 minutes a day. I'm devoting 20 seconds to this. But I do it on a daily basis. And the way I remind myself is I take pictures of myself, and I tape them to my computer, or I tape them to the TV at home or something like that, so that I'm like, oh yeah. Okay, let's do these exercises real quick before we watch, the next episode of whatever. So
love that. I love those little reminders. I had a mentor once who he talked about, and I did it for a while. I haven't done it in probably about a year, but he had automatic reminders on his computer that would pop up that said, "Get off your butt, idiot," for himself, where it was about getting up from the computer and walking around and getting that little bit of movement because you're at your computer all day long. But these are little reminders that simple to do, arms in the field goal position, going back. My biggest problem is I have a bubble butt. And so I don't know if I would actually have the right posture.
No, you have more challenge now. You have to somehow
go back further.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Those are really good exercises and simple. Like we said earlier, it's the micro, not the actual habit. It's the micro habit, right? So that's so important.
So I got one more.
Yeah.
So most of the people listening to this are probably dentists, or they are entrepreneurs of some sort.
Yep. Private practice owners. Yep.
So in my office, we have an hour for lunch. Okay. Do I need an hour for my lunch? No, I can finish my lunch in 15 minutes or something like that. And what I noticed is for a long time, I was developing a habit where I would finish eating my lunch, and then whoever else was sitting at the table, we would gossip a little bit. But then eventually it would evolve into most of us looking straight down at our phones.
Right.
So I got a Fitbit as a Christmas present or something like that. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to just go for walks so I can get more steps because it feels better. Well, anyway, I live in Cleveland. It's very cold. So I would force myself to go for walks, and I would put my gloves on and my hat and all that kind of stuff. But actually what turned the table for me, as Charles Duhigg said, when you develop a habit, there needs to be you need to get some reward at some point.
Sure. Yep.
And what I found was my favorite podcasts, that was an opportunity for me to put on my headphones and listen to my favorite podcast when I would go for a walk. I'm not a very fast reader. And so I just finished the Harry Potter series, for example. It would have taken me 2 years to finish the Harry Potter series. But I wanted to relate to my kids. So and going for a walk and listening to Harry Potter on my headphones, it's like the ice cream in the middle of the day. It's
right.
I'm so excited. Oh, I can't wait. It's my last patient before lunch. I can't wait to eat my lunch and then go for my 20 or 30, whatever minute walk and listen to my podcast or listen to my Audible book.
Yep.
That has become such a pleasure. I forgot that it's something good for me.
Yep.
You know, it's like, oh, I can't wait to find out who killed the blah, blah, blah. You know, that has
So
become a real pleasure. And it's actually, it started off as an alleged good habit, right?
Right. And almost start off as a have to, and now it's a want to. It's a get out there and get that bread. I love that analogy. It's the ice cream in the middle of the day because it's your thing. It uplifts you. It gets you outside. It gets you prepared for the next part of your day. It's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of for teams doing middle of the day huddles, not just morning huddles, because it's like halftime, right? Like you're getting pumped up again. Maybe something when something. Yeah, absolutely. When something goes bad in the beginning of your day, maybe a patient goes off or it didn't go the way it was supposed to, you're behind schedule. Why are you not using the time in the middle of the day to rejuvenate yourself by going on that walk, but also with your team of, all right, guys, had a rough morning, but now let's get back on schedule. Everybody in. Yep, it's the halftime show, right? It's the moment that you get to actually go the next most busy part of your day typically.
That's excellent.
So I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, tons of great information. We love this. Thank you so much for sharing that. We've come to the part of our show where we do our 6 rapid fire questions, where it's just a matter of me throwing a question out there and you giving us your best quick answer that you can think of. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
All right. So first is, what's the number one thing that you wish they would have taught you in graduate school or in school in general?
In dental school, I wish they had told me that patients are forgiving of bad outcomes in dentistry if you're just nice and genuine. That you're not always going to be perfect, but if you are nice and genuine, patients will forgive you.
Love it. That's really powerful. That's really, and nobody said anything like that before. That's great. What's a book that you believe every private practice owner should read?
Okay. Have you heard of a guy named Dave Ramsey?
Of course.
Okay. He wrote a book called Entree Leadership.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a life-changing book. It was a truly life-changing book for me and my wife. Everything about our life changed for the better after reading that book.
That is great. We will make sure we put that in the show notes. I actually haven't read it yet. I've heard of it, and I'm a huge Audible listener, podcast. And
that's how I listened to it, actually. It was the Audible. Yeah.
Oh, I'll definitely be downloading that. That's great. In my book, The Practice RX, I focus a lot on team culture and team performance as the foundation for business growth. What do you see as the biggest challenge private practice owners are facing with their teams and their office culture?
Well, I believe that the strongest personality often becomes the strongest personality dictates the practice culture.
You're 100% correct.
That's not okay. The person who was born with the loudest voice and the strongest personality, they are not entitled to make the office run based on their values, their whims, their personal culture.
Their crankiness, their mood.
100%. And a lot of times a stronger personality is going to have a less pleasant demeanor when they are stressed out, or a more combative nature when things don't go that way. That can't be the practice culture. And so I've noticed that, people come up to me and they're like, Gupta, you're like loud and you're gregarious. You obviously are the strongest personality in your office. You don't know what it's like. And that's true. I can't completely relate to a shy, quiet person who runs their office. But I can tell you that a shy, quiet person, if they can make their culture, if their particular personality shine in their office, that's going to be a very pleasant office. Because shy, quiet people, they have a gift that I don't have. And that is they create a calming presence. And having a dental practice or any type of small business that creates a calming presence is very important. The only problem, the only hurdle is that shy, quiet person has to confront the strong personality and let them know that the practice culture is going to be based on the values of the entire team and not the values of the strongest personality.
Well, it's kind of like that there's Eastern philosophies around the quietest person can be the strongest if they actually own that, not shyness, but the quietness, the stillness. That's what I'm looking for. Still.
If they value their own
Yes.
shyness, isn't it interesting? American culture doesn't value shyness.
Right.
If we start to realize that shy people are like killing it in life,
Yep.
just as much as loud people are. If people start to realize that they have potential, tremendous value as shy people,
Yep.
boy, I hope at some point in my life I am able to instill that leadership in a person who's a quieter person.
That's awesome. Hey, before we get to the last two questions, how can people reach out to you?
Okay, so I have a website, not my dental office website, but my speaker website is called BeBetterSeminars.com. So it's like the word B-E, and then better, BETTER, seminars.com. And actually, now that I think about it, I think I bought the domain called Ankur So as long as you can spell those Indian names, ANKURGUPTA, seminars.com, or at least Google it or something like that. It's probably the easiest way.
Well, we'll put both of those in the show notes and make sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah,
do that for sure. All right. What's the best advice you've ever received on life or business?
Okay, this is a great one. I gave a talk actually about eating better at a library about 4 years ago. And the audience was wonderful. They were listening to everything. And then one lady said, better medicine than your diet is to laugh every day. And I was like, laugh every day? Here I was like watching Breaking Bad and all these like hardcore Homeland, all these things that were like giving me bad dreams. And I was like, so I went home, I said, Nisha, why don't we do this? Before we go to bed, let's watch some Netflix of a stand-up comedian. Let's make sure that we laugh every day. That worked out so well that now at the end of our morning huddles, every day at the end of the morning huddle, we have to watch a funny YouTube, like a Jimmy Kimmel clip or something, or Ellen DeGeneres clip or something like that, just so that we make sure we check that box that we laugh every day.
There is so much evidence to prove that when you are laughing, as a matter of fact, if you are in a good mood, in a positive atmosphere, your learning capability goes up by 31%.
Oh, so I don't know that.
Make sure people are positive in there. Then it's 31% they've been able to measure. It's awesome. So what's a resource or a tool that you've used to grow your practice?
So I want to give you two. So I talked to you about Entree Leadership, the book.
Yes.
It was fantastic.
Yep.
There's another book that I'd like you to hopefully put in your show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's called Atomic Habits by
Yes.
James Clear. Oh, have you read it?
Yep, it's great.
Awesome, isn't it? So that was quite a life changer for me as well. And then one thing that I would recommend is something called, so I keep a planner with me, and that's helpful for me in creating checklists. But there's a planner journal from a company called Best Self, BESTSELF, and then instead of .com, it's .co. Trust me, I have no like financial interest at all in this company at all. Yeah. But anyway, I bought this Best Self planner a year ago, and I was very intentional and very serious about making sure I followed the directions. It asks you how you rate your life in terms of this and that, all your different buckets, how you rate your life and what your plan is to up your rating. And then it takes you to your monthly calendar, and you kind of write down your strategy on how you're going to up that rating for the month. What are the things you're going to be intentional about? Anyway, this planner has been an extremely valuable tool for me because I follow it. I say next month is going to be the month in which I go to bed earlier. And it's also going to be the month in which I go for walks every morning. And this is also going to be the month. And I write those things down, and I put little X's when I do those things for the day. And I realize that if you want to systematize personal improvement, it's got to be on paper. Yep. And you have to have the satisfaction of writing check marks or X's when you actually accomplish something. So
true.
As opposed to just saying, I'm going to eat better. And then one day you eat better. And you're like, oh, you eat better. And then there's no system. There's nothing systematic about that. This book has helped me systematize these things.
Well, it's the number one way that, like, the number one proven weight loss program in the world has always been and always will be, write your food down in a food journal.
Oh my
because
God.
you have that moment of writing it down and going, yep, I ate this, I did, and that personal accountability. The checklist, same idea, right? Like, okay, I did this and this and this. Yeah, I fulfilled the things that I said I wanted to do today. Look, that it wasn't all up in my head. And that's
Yeah.
great. I love it. Well, those are great resources. I love those. Man, everything you've given us has been golden. It's no wonder you're doing the amazing work that you are doing in the world, and the best in the world at what you do. Thank you so much for sharing all this amazing knowledge with us today.
I appreciate it, Dino. It's truly an honor for me to have the opportunity to contribute to this.
Oh, the honor is all ours. Seriously, like I know that there are doctors who have pulled over, have stopped on the treadmill to take notes and to write stuff down because you've done an amazing job, and I really appreciate it. And for all of you listening, remember that the reason why we do this show is so that you can share those good and those best practices with the people around you, your colleagues, your families, your friends, and really take them into your own life and do the best you can. And as you know, in our show, our goal here is always to help you have be more proactive, more productive, and more profitable in all areas of your life and business. So thank you so much for listening to the show, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.